We're just missing Chair Paula. Jeez.
Hello, everyone. See if the emails just came in.
Karen's on vacation in the mountains.
Who is?
You are.
No, I'm not. I wish. Okay. Need some money coming for water.
Chair Paul, your camera might be a little blurred. You might want to just try cleaning the lens.
That has worked in the past.
Yeah,
Sure.
you have the anomaly where your background is clear and you are
I don't know why that background is up. I didn't do that.
Yeah, no. You resolved
pretty.
you resolved your blurred image.
Right, that's a start. Thank you. Just dirt again. Okay. Agenda. Call the roll, please.
Yes. Director Roberson. Director Anderson,
Here,
Director Mallett,
Here.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
going back to Director Roberson,
Yes, I'm here.
Vice Chair Adams. Vice Chair Adams.
You're muted.
She is
She's
here.
trying to stay here.
I'm here. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Chair Paw.
Here.
All directors are present.
Are there any additions or corrections to the closed session agenda?
Madam Chair, there are no additions, corrections, or deletions to the agenda. I do note that we have 4 members of the public and need to take public comment.
Okay, let's do that now.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on the closed session agenda, please raise your hand. And Chair Paw, I see no raised hands.
And why don't we, council, can you read us into closed session then? At this time?
You're
Oh,
unmuted.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're muted.
Madam Chair, we do have 5 items on the agenda. We have a conference with legal counsel concerning pending litigation. That's the Water Management District against LAFCO of Monterey County. We have conference with the real property negotiators discussing with Mr. Stolt and myself the consideration of the acquisition of the private utility properties owned by Cal-Am. We have conference on existing litigation, which is the administrative action of Cal-Am's application to obtain approval for the amended and restated water purchase agreement before the Public Utilities Commission. And we have 2 items of anticipated litigation. First is Mercer Fraser versus Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. That's a contract dispute. And the second is the possible alleged breach of contract relating to the storage and recovery agreement and the water purchase agreement between Cal-Am and the Water Management District.
Recording stopped.
Right, Mario, if you could join at 6, and then for all those attendees, please do the same and return back for the open session at 6 p.m. Give it a couple seconds here. Mar-
Rest.
Good evening, members of the board and staff, members of the public. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Board of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. It's May 16th, and we are going to begin the open session now, the public session. Let's call the roll, please.
Director Roberson,
Here.
Director Anderson,
Here.
Director Mallett, Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
going back to Director Malik.
Muted.
Yeah, he's muted. Can you unmute yourself, Director? There you are.
I'm here.
Thank
Vice
you.
Chair Adams,
Here.
Chair Paul,
Here.
all directors are present.
Thank you. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any additions and corrections to the public portion of the? Thank you. Can we take it out to public for oral communications now, please, Joelle?
Yes, anyone wishing to address the board on the consent calendar, information items, closed session items, or matters not listed on the agenda may only do so during oral communications. Please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, push *9. And Chair Paul, I see no raised hands. So I return this back to the board.
Thank you. Let's move on to the consent calendar next. Do any of the directors wish to pull any of these items from the consent calendar? And I hear apparently not. Let's ask if any member of the public wants to pull anything from the consent calendar.
Chair Paul, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move that we accept the consent calendar as listed.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, well, one of you is going to be the second. So Director Malik, you seconded the motion, the same motion then, because, okay, let's vote.
Director Edwards,
Approval?
Director Mallett,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
excellent. GM report.
Hey, Joelle, do you want to run the first one,
Yes,
item 10?
excellent. GM report.
Hey, Joelle, do you want to run the first one? And we'll go straight to the next slide. This is our monthly status report on regulatory compliance. Interestingly, later in item 15, the public hearing is for a little bit of discussion about the water supply forecast. And so, as you know, we put out targets quarterly, and then we track actual. And as you can see here, the Carmel River actual is significantly beneath its target. The Seaside Groundwater Basin, because of the zero target in Laguna Seca, inevitably is going to be over with its actual, which it is here. But net, we're still 605 acre feet through the end of April below the target. Next slide. These are some of the other water rights. There's been zero ASR recovery although we did put 71 acre feet into the ground in December and a little bit of January. Pure Water Monterey recovery is actually exceeding the target. This is on a water year basis. You should know that our commitment for 3,500 acre feet is on a fiscal year basis. So with 2 months remaining in the current fiscal year, I can tell you we've delivered 2,947 acre feet from Pure Water Monterey, most recently 362 acre feet in April, which if you were to extrapolate that out over 12 months, that exceeds 4,300 acre feet. So our monthly production with the addition of the new wells makes the Pure Water Monterey project look beautiful. It's working very, very well. Water quality is spot on, and deliveries are exceeding what we've been looking for. We also have this year put 167 acre feet into the reserve. We'll increase that towards the end of the month of June. We are going to back off some of the injection at Pure Water Monterey to leave some water freed up for the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project deliveries from the recycled water, the tertiary treated recycled water up at the plant. Next slide. This is production for customer service, which we use as a measure of demand. The important thing here is the bottom right-hand corner. We are tracking through the first 7 months of the year at about 81 acre feet lower than last year, which is good. We're still a couple months away from the hottest, driest months of the season, which could lead to quite a bit more water usage, and we'll talk about drought messaging with item 13. Next slide. Believe it or not, it rained in April. That little bar represents 1.15 inches up at the San Clemente rain gauge. Next slide. And here the red line is the cumulative through the year. The blue bars are daily totals. And we're now at 12.8 inches of total rainfall, which is only 63% of long-term average. If the year was declared over today, the water year, it would be defined as critically dry based on rainfall. Next slide. And on stream flow data, unimpaired stream flow, year to date, we would, if the year were to stop today, we would be declared dry, so not critically dry. Critically dry on rainfall and just dry on stream flow, but the two are, obviously interconnected. And you can see, February through April were pretty low stream flow. Interestingly, we've got water in storage throughout the resource system of over 29,000 acre feet. This community only uses about 9,600 acre feet a year, so roughly a 3-year supply is out there. The constraints on that supply, of course, are regulatory. And that concludes item 10 on the regulatory compliance.
May I stop you there for briefly?
Yep.
Well, first of all, that's great news about the production of Pure Water Monterey, and I just think it's worth noting for the public that since January, the largest source of our water is Pure Water Monterey. Since January of this year, it became the largest source. So that's worth pausing and noting and celebrating, actually.
And celebrating that it's working so well, because as the largest source, 3,500 acre feet out of the total demand is actually more than a third of all the demand of customers. So it is the largest source, 3,500 acre feet.
Good work.
Yeah. It's been a team effort. Joel, you want to run the next items 11 and 12 for me, or you want me to run them?
Excuse me, I have my hand up.
Oh, yeah.
If I could ask a quick question, please. In the governor's revised budget, he put in 1.5 billion, 1.6 billion with the B an additional drought money, including water conservation, including marketing campaign for that, lawn removal, ag, conservation, and water recycling. I'm wondering if there has been discussion at the district among staff on what we might be thinking about as far as looking at that opportunity with the surplus that the budget has, California state budget has, in order for us to be able to move forward some of the ideas that you might be having.
Yeah, we just got a copy of the revise over the weekend, and we haven't looked at it yet. But we don't leave these stones unturned, so we'll be looking to see what we can do.
Good.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for raising it. Okay,
All right, let me just close that. Yeah, so Joe, I'll let you run this next one. So this is just an update on a couple of items 11 and 12, and then a little bit of an unagendized item. So next slide, please. This is an update on water supply projects. The two kind of currently in play, the Pure Water Monterey expansion water purchase agreement. As has been discussed in closed session, the hearings are over. Opening briefs are due shortly, followed by reply briefs, and then 90 days from the reply brief date takes us out to roughly September 20th. Some debate as to whether it's September 19th or 21st, but anyway, that would be based on the scoping memo and the administrative law judge, the latest we might see a proposed decision on the water purchase agreement. The second phase begins also in, I believe, July 20th with opening testimony for what's called phase 2, which is the long-term supply and demand issues. And that schedule then leads to a CPUC decision, proposed decision, roughly by April 2nd of next year. So still quite a long way off. And that long-term supply and demand number discussion is meant to inform the commission on the Monterey Peninsula's needs and sizing of water supply projects and sufficiency of Pure Water Monterey and its expansion and the other resources. So that'll be some interesting discussion, which I fully expect to have hearings because of the contentious issues at hand. Next slide. So item 12, the Water Demand Committee.
I think Mario, you need.
Yeah, Mario, I think you need to mute.
I muted him.
Okay. While this was titled SB 1157, which is a Hertzberg bill, it really kind of stems more from 2018 legislation that's just now kind of finding its way into the water code and into the regulatory framework. And that those were an Assembly bill by Friedman and a Senate bill by Hertzberg back in 2018. And that bill is creating a new framework for setting what we call urban water use objectives. And the objectives basically establish standards and practices or targets based on indoor residential use, outdoor residential use, commercial, institutional, and industrial water use, water losses, and then the catch-all category of other unique uses and situations that can have a material effect on an urban water supplier's total water use. So what's going to happen is a water use objective will be established, and then annually the actual water usage will be analyzed relative to the objective. And if there's chronic lack of compliance, then an urban water user may be penalized and so forth. And so what SB 1157 did is it further reduced the standards for indoor residential water use. So that would be the category A up above. So that beginning in 2025, it's 47 gallons per person per day. And then by 2030, it's 42 gallons per person per day. And that's just the indoor residential use component. By comparison, our combined indoor and outdoor residential use, at least as stated in CalAM's urban water management plan, has been 48 gallons per capita per day for the last 5 years as an average. So we're in a very good place. If you were to strip out the outdoor residential use for our area, which is something that when we find some time and staff to analyze the numbers, we will do. Kind of need to compare the monthly data that's submitted to the monthly rainfall so that you know whether you've got an irrigation month or not an irrigation month, and then you try to separate the two, and it gives you a reasonable proxy for just indoor use versus the combined indoor and outdoor. So this is going to be something that we as a community and frankly all 405 urban water suppliers in California will be facing going forward. The reporting was supposed to begin this year. It's beginning to look like that may not happen, but you can rest assured with all this focus on drought, that it will happen and it will become a regular thing. Then there was some, next slide. We also addressed for our Water Demand Committee last week the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation numbers by jurisdiction. And you can see the little asterisk footnote says that these don't include the unincorporated Monterey County, which, you know, it has its own housing overlay for the countywide general plan. And Carmel Valley has 190 units of housing allocated to it. 24 of those were the Delfino property, the old airport property, which is now Griggs's nursery. So they're unlikely to get built. So when you think of, you know, 166 units, a big chunk of that will get gobbled up by the Rancho Piñata Villages project. And then, you know, if you threw another 50 along Highway 68 corridor or 50 in Pebble Beach, and then, you know, we kind of eyed it rule of thumb saying, well, how much is really going to get built in an 8 to 10 year period? We have the unincorporated Monterey County being about 10 to 15 additional acre feet than what you're going to see here. But these are the RHNA goals by the 4 different categories: very low, low income, moderate, and market rate or above moderate. Next slide. When you convert these roughly 6,200 housing units to water requirements, what we did for multifamily is we said there's going to be an equal amount of 1 bedroom, 1 bath and 2 bedroom, 2 bath with a kitchen. That moderate's going to be about half single family, half multifamily. And the market rate is going to be about 2/3 single family and 1/3, you know, higher end multifamily. And so assigning these use factors or our fixture unit count, you can see by housing category, and then in the total, the 6,188 housing units require roughly 750 acre feet of water. And I'll leave it to people closer to the issue to debate how much of this housing will actually get built in an 8-year cycle. Based on our own experience in issuing water permits, we don't expect there to be a huge dent, but let's just say it did. Next slide. You know, the interesting thing is on May 2nd, the California Department of Finance announced population estimates, and the whole state for second year in a row declined in population. So in a conversation with the Housing and Community Development folks late last week, they said, well, that's because there's not enough housing for people to move to. So you can debate that one as well as to why people have left California. But it does make you think about the paradox a little bit, that we've got housing allocation numbers that have been assigned to our 6 cities here that are 5 and 6 times higher than they were in the last cycle. Yet population growth is predicted to be very slow. So it's just another data point that we'll have to kind of monitor. And then finally, next slide. And just a reminder that the Pure Water Monterey expansion is expected to deliver another 2,250 acre feet. So even with in-lieu recharge of the Seaside Groundwater Basin, even if significant progress was made on the housing elements, it's still roughly 3 times more than the housing water requirement for that 6th RENA cycle. And that concludes my reports. Item 13, I'm going to turn over to Stephanie Lyon.
Thank you. I just want to give the board a quick update on what's happening with the statewide drought response and Executive Order N722. This is current pending action by the State Water Board that, Joel, you can go to the next slide, please, that we all need to be aware of. On March 28th, Governor Newsom directed the State Water Resources Control Board to begin the process of adopting an emergency regulation. And they were given until May 25th to take this action. It is currently calendared for the board's consideration at their May 24th meeting. The action that the board will be considering is essentially requiring all urban water suppliers, and that's actually a defined term, to go ahead and implement stage 2 of their conservation plans, which would theoretically produce up to a 20% reduction in use. An urban water supplier is a large water supplier. So locally on the peninsula, Cal-Am is that supplier, and Marina Coast Water District also falls under that definition. So they would be required to implement their 2nd stage. We are always in stage 1 of our plan, which includes a lot of water waste restrictions and enforcement. And so this doesn't particularly affect the Cal-Am system in the sense that we've been doing most of the things that the state would want us to do as part of this action. But the other thing that does come up with this is that the order would ban irrigation of non-functional turf in all the non-residential uses, including condominium common areas. And so that'll probably be the biggest thing that we need to think about finding out who these people are, contacting them, and then we also become the enforcement agency with our enforcement powers. Next, please. As I said, we're always in stage 1, and basically our stage 2 is a call to action. It is increasing our presence in the community, increasing outreach and information, and increasing our water waste enforcement. So as I mentioned, that primarily will be a difference to us only in this non-functional turf category, but we will have people out in the field more than we've had them in the past, should we move to stage 2. Next. So the schedule, as I said, the Water Board is going to consider adopting the regulation on the 24th. They would have an implementation requirement that all of these affected suppliers would have to implement by June 10th. So we're anticipating bringing this to the board for action at the May 26th budget meeting. At this time, the district is trying to get together with Cal-Am to coordinate how we would go about doing the implementation, what our plan would be for public outreach. And as I said on my slide here, it's just we have a number of different ideas and things that we want to do, and especially I'm in the process of beginning some outreach to the hospitality industry to remind them of our not providing water unless it's on request. And so we'll try to get that message out as soon as possible, but the board will talk about this further May 26th, and at that time we'll have more information as to what action the board has taken. I think that's all I had for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Questions for Stephanie or for Dave?
I have a question about, if I, through the chair. I have a question about state law versus the State Water Board, and the call for these conservation actions. The, is the legislation that was initiated for this, does that have a 5-year run, a 3-year run, a 1-year run, or something like that, as compared to what the discretion is for the State Water Board on issuing their restrictions and what their time frame might be for how long they last? It's a dilemma in my mind about where the authority comes from, and then what are the durations of these restrictions?
Well, I'll let Dave Laredo actually respond if he has a response to that, but I believe that the emergency regulation that's being considered on the 24th is actually of duration of up to a year. So I think that answers it. It would be a temporary ordinance. It could be rescinded earlier, but I think it would only go a maximum of 1 year at this time.
Yeah, in the last go round, it was Governor Brown during the drought a few years ago, and he issued a series of executive orders, and the executive orders did not have an expiration unless it was declared in the executive order. And a lot of times it was, this will remain in place until it's rescinded by other executive order. So I think they've got a little bit more flexibility than, for example, the district does with an emergency ordinance, which does then only have a life of 1 year and then has to be renewed or made permanent. So, you know, these regulations are being promulgated in response to the executive order that Newsom issued.
Thank you.
Mayor Roberson?
Yes, thanks. As we were talking about that first item with respect to limits on the interior use of water, and the gorilla in the room is exterior use, because that makes up 70 to 80% of someone's consumption. So my question is the state looking at the real problem, which is external use of water, not inside the house, but outside?
Well, they are, but they're going to include an outdoor residential water use factor. And what happened last time was the southern cities, Rancho Santa Fe outside of San Diego, you know, they started out at, you know, a couple hundred gallons per capita per day. And so the state went out of their way to actually stratify these urban water producers and said, if your gallons per capita per day are in this category, then you only need to save 5%. If you're in the next category, 10%. And the really big ones were in the 5th category, and they had a higher savings target. I believe it was 30% or something like that. They have not done that yet in this case. And in the codified version of that Assembly and Senate bill from 2018, it's clear that there's going to be some wiggle room, and that every urban water provider is going to plead their case for why they need a bigger factor for outdoor use, and why they need a bigger, I think it's the 5th factor, the other extenuating circumstances unique to your region or your system. There will be pressure that will come along to reduce water losses. We do, on this community, Callan does a pretty good job on the water loss coefficients. They've invested quite a bit into that. But yeah, there will be games that will be played depending.
Well, it's so typical, because what the state legislature, in my humble opinion, needs to look at is Southern California. So the month of March, the water use in Southern California in the San Diego, LA region went up 25%, even though they were told they were in the middle of a drought.
Yeah.
And I'm just shaking my head and then saying, okay, so they passed a state law, another one of my pet peeves that applies to across the board, ignoring Santa Cruz, Monterey, Central Coast, which was well within all of the requirements, and just refusing to bite the bullet. And you look at some of the articles with the number of swimming pools and grass and et cetera. It's it's the proverbial head in the sand, ignoring the big problem, which is gross overconsumption outside. Well, that's a speech, I guess. So, but maybe I don't know, but that's the state for you. That they need really to work on defining the problem. They usually come up with a solution and haven't defined the problem, which is overuse, especially in Southern California. So they're talking 30 million people who are draining the Colorado River, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, etc., and the Sierras, and meanwhile they're not really dealing with that overconsumption, and nor does it seem like the general population has figured this out yet. Then you look at the RENA numbers and you shake your head and say, where's this all coming from, folks? You've got to solve the water problem first. Thank you for listening.
All right.
And we'll be expecting a declaration of the grassy area in front of City Hall and Colton Hall as a public park.
Yes.
Or sport field, either one.
Well, that's another question that Karen kind of brought up, and that is, or Stephanie, and that is you do have schools and municipalities. And one of the motivations, of course, is just the price of waters. But Colton Hall grass, if you've looked at it recently, it's pretty dry.
It is. You're doing good.
Yeah, we're doing all right. But yeah, and that's the whole point, is have public grass areas instead of everybody having their own patch. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, we're doing all right. But yeah,
Okay.
Through the chair, if
Yes.
I may, just a couple of questions. So General Manager, we're going into the second year. Are we in a drought here on the Central Coast or here on the peninsula? That's my first question.
Yep.
So
Okay.
we are in the drought now.
Well, so I'm going to say we are, because it appears that we're going to have our second dry or critically dry year in a row, and that's our measurement for drought.
Okay.
You know, we've got a few more months to go in the water year, but really hard pressed to see us not being ending up as a dry year. And we were definitely a dry year last year. So, but the interesting thing about our little situation is you get one good month of rain like we did in December, and the aquifer beneath the river fills up. And the Seaside Groundwater Basin is adjudicated, so whether it's being replenished by rain or not, all of those pumpers have their allocation and they're entitled to pump it. You know, if there's water in your well and you can get out your allocation, you're entitled to take it. So we don't really have a supply shortage here. What we have is potential regulatory shortage, and as we have talked about previously, a capacity to produce the water shortage. But those are different problems than a supply shortage. So unlike the Central Valley and the Central Valley Project and CalFed, where you go and you look and you say, the reservoir is at 12%, then everybody who relies on that reservoir has a problem. Right now, our reservoirs for the peninsula are relatively full.
Okay. My next question is these these AMBAG numbers. They're not official yet, are they?
Correct. It's still draft form. I think everybody expects them to stay where they're at or go higher, but not lower.
Okay, but can we do our supply and demand based on that number and bring that forward? I would like to see the board see in probably July or August, the supply and demand, not to approve it, but to look at these numbers. Also look at replenishing the Seaside Basin with that 700 acre feet. I like for you to even put some water in there for the county. I was thinking about that, so we will know that it's enough water in the expansion to move forward.
Right. Yeah. And
I'm not saying we're going to approve nothing, so everybody can't jump up and down. We're just going to get in front of it so we can see it.
Yeah, and I think we kind of need to do that because the phase 2 portion of the current Public Utilities Commission application, 21-11-024, the initial direct testimony is due July 20th. And then we as the district would be responding within 30 days of that. So we will need to focus in right in that time frame.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? On this last, then, okay, let's move on to report from District Council, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. The board had an overly ambitious closed session set for 5 p.m. We were not able to complete our discussion of all matters at that time. So the board will be returning to closed session after the conclusion of your open session meetings to discuss the matters that we were not able to conclude. The board did consider 2 items for which there was some direction. The first had to do with the pending litigation of Water Management District against the LAFCO of Monterey County. The board did receive a status report on that matter, did review the California American Water's motion for leave to intervene. CalAm has asked to be named a real party in interest in this proceeding. That motion is before the court and it will be heard on June 17th at 8:30 in the morning in Department 15, at which time CalAm will be seeking permission to intervene in this action as an independent party. At the moment, the parties are just the Water Management District and LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission of Monterey County, and the commissioners of that same commission. Once again, that will be heard by the court and a ruling thereafter will be issued. The other matter was a conference with legal counsel concerning anticipated litigation, and this had to do with the claim of Mercer Fraser Company against the Water Management District with respect to a contract dispute. The board on a motion of Director Paul, Chair Paul, and a motion, second on the motion, excuse me, by Vice Chair Adams, was to authorize settlement of the dispute in the amount of $47,000. The vote in favor of that settlement was 6-1 with Director Edwards dissenting. Madam Chair, that concludes my report of the actions taken in closed session, and we will once again be returning to closed session, concluding the open session discussions.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments by board members? Okay. Then this is the time in our agenda for directors' reports. Directors, you have meetings, conferences, outside meetings that you want to report on? Yes, Director Riley.
Through the chair, the Water Master had a meeting in earlier this month. There were 2 things that of some interest, I think, to us, for sure. One was that they are having a difference of opinion with some of the SGMA, the Salinas Valley GSA, on how the timeframes are determined or are left out, basically, for some actions that are there on their planning process. I thought that Bob Jakes did a nice job of identifying these lack of projected timeframes, and he felt there ought to be more data about who monitors, what's monitored, how you measure it, and will there be stages at which actions might be necessary in order to speed it up or direct it or something or other. But anyway, that's the one issue that the Water Master staff was working on with that. The other thing is they're concerned that there's a lack of general awareness in the community about the role that Seaside Basin plays in the water supply, and they'd like to elevate the awareness of how important that is. One of the dilemmas, and I'm going to mix these 2 issues now together. One of the key issues is it may be important, but it's also important that the relationship of the water, of the Seaside Groundwater Basin to the other basins that are overdrafted, because this is an overdrafted basin too. So the other neighboring overdrafted basins take water from the from the seaside. So it's a leakage problem, or it's a gravity problem, because the water just keeps going to where the lowest depression is in the groundwater tables. And the Salinas 18400 is kind of the dominant player in the overdraft in the entire basin. So what Salinas pulls, they pull from three different, I mean, the ones we're concerned about, three different ways. The upper Seaside Groundwater Basin basin itself drains into a lower basin, which is in the Corral de Terre area. And that basin drains into the Salinas Basin. So what we have is a sequential problem that needs to be fixed starting at the worst end, which is the Salinas end. And if they don't get a good timing and a good plan in place and some implementation to fix that basin, that then helps fix the Corral de Terre Basin, and then actions in Corral de Terre then help fix the Seaside Basin. So there's a sequential issue that is a timing issue, and that's why Bob Jakes is as pressed as he is for the water master to try to identify the steps and the timing and the accuracy of actually the commitment to a time frame, and that's what he's promoting, and I'm supporting that. That need to get the time frames pinned down pretty precisely. So anyway, that's the update for groundwater. The water master meeting. I don't know if Dave, you wanted to add anything or just a perspective on that, or is that adequate? Okay.
I think that's okay.
Okay. So
there's some other things going on over there. Discussion about protected water levels and
yes,
things that there's no identifiable technology, infrastructure, or way to pay for, but
or water source. Yeah.
Or water source. And things that there's no identifiable technology, infrastructure, or way.
Any staff or board members have anything to add on that?
Just one comment, and that's the Monterey subbasin that you're referring to. That's over
Yes, Mary.
in the Corral de Terre area. The groundwater level has gone down 25 feet in the last 20 years. And that's, not a good sign.
Just a couple of things to report, just to let you all know that the general manager, I listened to your 152 committee meeting, and having it at noontime won't help you either. Because I didn't get it or be there. Also listen to the water demand. I'm glad we're putting out those Reno numbers, and I appreciate that. I also listened to George on Seaside Basin. So I'm still out there lurking around. So I just want to let them know. Thank you.
And you along with me and Director Riley attended the quarterly meeting of the Special Districts Association last month.
That's right. I thought we reported that, but that was a good meeting. George tried to start trouble.
George did.
That's right. I thought we reported. He told those folks we suing them.
Well, it was nothing they didn't already know, as far as I can remember.
That's right. He did a good job.
Okay.
Chair Pod, do you want to recognize the hand raised by John Tilley?
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yes.
Sarah, could you screen share the timer if you have it ready?
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yes.
And at this time, I would like to invite John Tilley. John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
John, are you there?
John?
I still see a hand raised.
Sounds like he's on now.
John, are you there? Okay, maybe he's having the same problem I had earlier this evening. All right, well, we'll come back. Why don't we wait a few minutes and we'll come back to John, give him another chance to speak.
Hello?
There we go.
Can you hear me all right?
Now we can, yes?
I was saying that it's difficult to understand how it could be said that that project is functioning fine, in light of that article again in the Carmel Pine Code. It depicted a situation where we were told that the transit time through the aquifer would be 6 months, and it came in under 2 months, which has triggered a whole series of problems. And I'm sure you're all very aware of that. And I think that hearing it said in public that that project has no problems is very alarming, because I mean, if I was in your position, I would be really deeply concerned, and I would be discussing it with the public. I think that it's time really for these discussions to come out in the open, for solutions to be sought, and for, as the word teamwork was used earlier, I totally agree with you, Dave. It's time for teamwork to be exhibited among the people and entities involved in this so that we can find water solutions, because we have water problems. Thank you very much.
Dave, would you like to respond at all to that?
Well, I would just encourage Mr. Tilley to ask his friends at the water utility if a truck drove over the wellhead and it went out of service due to a mechanical issue, what was their plan? Because it's fundamentally the same issue. It's a one well issue, and it's an issue about extraction capacity that was identified multiple years ago with no visible progress.
And I would like to add to that, that this was, as you explained very well, in the article in the Pine Cone, if a reader read to the end of it. Yeah, and also it has not been said that there are no problems with the pure water. There have been challenges with the Pure Water Monterey project, but it's my understanding they are solvable problems. There's
Correct.
if there is sufficient cooperation.
And we also have, do we want to finish up public comment?
Are there any other?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
At this time, I would like to invite Kevin Dayton. Kevin, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, hello, Kevin Dayton, representing Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. Just wanted to let the board know that chamber leaders are definitely aware of what's going on with the water situation here. In fact, I created a folder of 26 documents related to this ASR 1 well issue. And I think that this board perhaps needs some more leadership on informing people honestly what's going on, because you're slowly eliminating all of the source water for the region without any clear solution. And I'll point out, I just saw a letter that is going to Monterey One Water from the Monterey County Water Resources Agency. It says, finally, we would like to request that all data related to the annual reporting of diversion and bypass flows for the Blanco Drain Diversion Water Right Permit 21376 and the Reclamation Ditch Diversion Water Right Permit 21377 be submitted to MCWRA staff by March 1st of each year to ensure timely submittal of annual reports to the State Water Resources Control Board. It's my belief that it's hard to track where the water is coming from. And even the Monterey One Water and the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District reports to their boards and committees aren't consistent. They don't match up, and it's very hard to track things. And I really believe that it would be in the interest of the public and also for the businesses that are here. You got to get this all together and provide people with a clear idea of what's happening. I think there's a real problem here, and it's better to get it out now rather than to, perhaps not want to have information come out that could be difficult or unpleasant to deal with. Thank you.
Well, actually, I'd like to say that the board is in total agreement that this is all public information. It needs to be public information. It is in the public domain, and for anyone who wants to know more about the problem of travel time and the problems related to the well ASR1 I refer you to the agenda packet for tonight's meeting, which has exchange of letters on this with specific information. So there is, I mean, the information we are making it public. There is no hiding anything. The dispute is all public information. The letters are very informative, and you can, if you read them, you'll understand the position of the parties.
All right, at this time, I would like to invite Melody Crislock. Melody, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Melody Crislock, Public Water Now. So, I mean, I think we should sort of step back here and get this straight. KLM had 20 years to come up with a new water supply to get us off the Carmel River. They couldn't do it. Monterey won, and MPWMD developed Pure Water Monterey and saved the day. So now they're producing 4,300 acre feet of water, and, you know, for CalAm, and so that they're not violating the CBO and overdrafting the river. And now we have CalAm whining because they can't use one ASR well to get the water out of the ground. I mean, seriously, CalAm can't even drill one well to solve its own problem. I mean, this is like the height of incompetence. Why are people, you know, pointing fingers at M1 Water and MPWMD? Go after CalAm. How long does it take to drill a well? 6 months? Or permit another well? I mean, and by the way, the Pinecone got that so wrong, you know, in what they were saying. This safety of reclaimed water in question was their subhead. The water from Pure Water Monterey has to meet very strict standards of purity before it's injected into the Seaside Basin. The safety of this water is not in question, as the Pinecone subtitle implies. This water is not toxic, it is not a health risk. Underground retention time does not kill bacteria, as they stated. It's only a backup so the water could be pulled out in case of an emergency. Not to mention the Pinecone is quoting their great authorities, which are just CalAm cheerleaders, Marianne Leffel and Rick Hoyer. I mean, that article can not be taken seriously. They have done a real disservice in trying to scare the community and discredit the amazing job that Monterey One and MPWMD have done. Hold your ground. Thank you so much for providing so much water for this community, and let's hope CalAm can figure out how to get it out of the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak?
Yes. Susan Schiavone, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you. I just want to add on to Melody's comment. I agree with everything she said, but you know, in my mind, this is like what you would call a manufactured crisis. Goes along with CalAm's would love us to all start getting fearful of water rationing so that they can soften us up for accepting a desal plan. So I think it's very unfortunate that a tempest is being made out of all of this, and really just reflects CalAm's mismanagement. And I mean, wouldn't you have a backup well? I mean, how bad can that be that you would not even have at least one or two permitted wells to back up what you have? That is just another example of why CalAm needs to be bought out. They're an incompetent company and they're arrogant about it, and they blame everybody else for what they do. So I am really a little bit upset about the whole created crisis here that could easily be solved if they have the will to do it. They can easily solve this by digging another well or getting the permits. So anyway, thank you. And I thank you all for all the hard work you're doing. And I hope that this whole issue can be resolved. It can be resolved. It's a solvable issue. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Susan. Are there other members of the public who want to speak?
Chair Paul, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Okay, well, thank you, all the members of the public who just spoke to us. And then,
Chair Paul, before you start, on the next one, I just want a clarification. Tonight in closed session, Dave, you told us Cal-Am is working on that situation over there with AFR one when trying to solve that situation. We gave some ideas out and they are accepted. There's two of them they're working on. So that problem is being taken care of. Correct me if I'm right or wrong.
Yeah, we've met with them. Our staff's met with both Cal-Am and City of Seaside, and had discussion with the Marina Coast Water District over one option. We've shared some data regarding the capacity of another well to collect and distribute some of the pure water Monterey water. And there's now some look at ASR well number 4 as a potential production well and what it would take to do that. So yeah, there are solutions being examined. That kind of
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
belatedly maybe, but it's good news. Good. I think we can move on to item 15.
Great. John Lear is here.
Good evening, Chair Paul, members of the board. This item is a public hearing and it's to receive and confirm the water supply forecast for the period of May 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2023, and consider adopting the rationing tables that would cover that period of time. And so can advance the next slide, please. So Rule 160 does two different things. One of the things it does is at the beginning of each water year, it sets forth and looks at the water that's available to cover that water year, and then divides it into percentages at which you track it against those percentages. And if you're getting near or above it, it would trigger rationing rules to get you to that water year. The secondary function that this rule does is it looks at a long-term forecast, which is taking 16 months. And so we convene this every May and look at, and that was because that's where the bulk of the rain has come through. Not much this year, but some other years more so. And we will know what the status the resource system is in. And looking forward to say, if we were to enter a drought and had very little rainfall, could we get through the end of this water year and next water year? So we look at not water projects in this table and rule, but what the Water Peninsula Resources System, and that includes the Carmel River, its tributaries, and the groundwater that's held in the Carmel Valley alluvial aquifer in the Seaside groundwater basin. Next slide, please. So here is the graphic, which people have seen with the Carmel Valley alluvial aquifer and the Seaside groundwater basin. Next slide, please. So this forecast, it considers Cal-Am and non-Cal-Am water demands that are going to be relied upon from these sources during May 2022 through September of 2023. And it's only, again, the component of the water supply that can legally be taken out of these sources where it is stored with the adjudication and the state board orders that are controlling how much water can come out of those. And the rest of those give us a target for production for our water supply projects of what we need to make up. But this component is to make sure that the water that's naturally being stored is going to be there when we call upon it in the next 16 months. So anything that is termed, that is going to be left in the ground above what is scheduled to be used for the rest of water year 2022, we term carryover storage. So again, this is based on the actual storage and does not account for environmental considerations such as the riparian and aquatic resources that would require relying on these resources as well. And it does go into what would trigger the water supply forecast that would affect appropriate reductions if we were to need to leave water in the ground, if we were to determine that we are in danger of running out of the natural waters that we are going to rely on for the next 16 months. Next slide, please. So when we look at the snapshot of where we are, as Dave said, we have a little over 29,000 acre feet in storage. You can see that the Los Padres is full. The upper Carmel Valley is at 94% full. Lower Carmel Valley is at 91% full. And Seaside Coastal is at 48%. Seaside Coastal is based upon the adjudicated amount, the natural safe yield, and the rate that it is consumed by all parties consuming it. And that is what's left over, and that resets every year. Whereas the alluvial aquifer and the Los Padres Dam, the estimates are based on actual water levels within those systems. And you can see that at the bottom, there's 88% capacity for the entire water resources system. So next slide, please. We go and we do the analysis, this outlaying in Rule 160, which is to take the May through September water demand for the current water year 2022, which is totals just over 5,600 acre feet for CalAm and non-CalAm. And then we have a component next to it that is the amount of water that we're going to be looking for out of the resource system for CalAm and non-CalAm users for water year 2023. When we sum those together down in the right corner, we see that we will need from the natural system just over 13,500 acre feet to get through the next 16 months. And as we determined on the previous slide, we have just over 29,100 acre feet in storage. Next slide, please. So we, according to the vocabulary in the rule, we can make the findings that the total usable system, usable storage in the system as of May 1st, 2022 is 29,160 feet. And to avoid any mandatory water rationing to save water, we need 13,552 of carryover storage. So according to this calculation, the carryover storage we have currently in the aquifer system and behind the reservoir is sufficient to begin water year 2023 with the full year supply and reserve that we would expect to pull on out of the natural system. Next slide, please. So with the analysis being what it is, staff recommendation to the board would be to receive long-term water supply forecast for the peninsula for the period of May 2022 through September 2023. And given that our carryover storage is sufficient, mandatory water rationing at this time is not required. And although what Stephanie stated is that we're always in stage one and will continue the activities of stage one. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? We can take this out to the public, see if any members of the public want to speak to this.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 15, please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, push *9. Chair Paul, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you. So we have staff is proposing that we adopt this resolution to update the data that supports the measure under Rule 160. Yes, Director Riley.
No, I just move adoption.
I'll second that. And on discussion, if I may,
please.
Dave, that's saying right now, our report saying stay in stage one. If the state goes into stage two, are we going to go into stage two too?
Yes, that's the plan, because the tariff sheet 14.1.1, which governs the CalAm main systems water shortage contingency and rationing framework, is a joint framework created between the district and CalAm. And so while it's not necessarily needed per se, we ought to get on board with the right messaging. And because our stage 2 here is just greater enforcement, meaning the possibility of some fines and penalties for water waste and increased awareness. I think it's probably good communication to have. And that way, CalAm will be able to demonstrate that they're in stage 2. We have not yet fully scheduled our joint meeting. We put out some dates and times, but we need to have a discussion also about, there are specific requirements about billing inserts and notifications, which come with a cost to CalAm, and we just have to make sure they're on the same page with us. Some of our direct mail pieces to hospitality and hotels and restaurants and so forth are things that we would probably do on our side of the ledger, but jointly with CalAm. So those are the kinds of things we will be talking about. But yeah, it's an executive order of the governor. So
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it's more clear now with our report and what we are going to do in the future. Thank you.
Supervisor Adams?
Thank you. I know that there's a motion on the floor in a second, but I forgot that there was a question that I wanted to ask John.
Please.
Just for my own edification. So you were showing that there's adequate storage in the Kernel Valley aquifers, but that doesn't mean that we're able to use that, does it? I'm just wondering if you can clarify the difference between what is like physical water availability and then what's really available to CalAm to withdraw, considering their legal limits.
Yeah, the 29,000 acre feet that's in storage in the system is the entirety of the amount of water in the system, if available, if there were no rules in place. So because there are state board order, now in water year 2023 will restrict legal withdrawals to the 3376 acre feet. That's what this rule is planning for, because we are planning on this rule. Used to be a lot more important when there were no water resources projects, because that was your sum total of your supply of water. Now, because of the rules, like we were saying before, Pure Water Monterey is now supplying a third of the demand of the peninsula. So we are not, because of those rules, we're not looking to these sources to supply the water that the water resources projects are supplying to the community. But what we're doing is we're looking at these sources and say, based upon the amount of water that's in the storage of the natural system, and now knowing that we're only allowed to take this portion of it next year, will that portion be available for us next year when we go to get it? That's what we're looking at.
And Director Adams, he does start with usable. So it's not every drop that's in there, it's what's deemed to be usable. Now, we've had that discussion before that if you really super drained it and you got down to the bottom of a well, you could conceivably start sucking in air. And so the true usable number, I don't think has been proven, but it is going with what is believed to be accessible, not just every drop that's in the system. So in other words, we think we can get every drop of that 29,000 if we had to over time. So in other words, we think we can get every drop of that 29.
You have a follow-up question?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Adam, you have a motion on the floor?
Yes.
I'll call for the question.
Okay, let's vote.
Director Anderson? Director Edwards?
Yes.
Director Malik?
Director Anderson, Director Malik, you're both muted. Can you unmute?
Yes.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Roberson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes.
The motion carries on a vote of 7-0.
Thank you, John. Okay. So we have informational items. Are there any questions about the informational items? If not, we can adjourn this meeting and return to our closed session to finish our closed session items. So the meeting is adjourned. Let's take 5 minutes and resume at 7:25.
You hear me? Hi, Joel. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Joel? Joel?